So, what I want to do a bit different this week, I just want to talk a little bit about happiness. And often, these conversations, we dive into the nature of mind, and we answer people's questions about their own perception. So, how you're perceiving the world, how you're perceiving the self, your separate self, whether or not you're aware of yourself as awareness. And they're very interesting conversations. But sometimes I feel it's good to approach the subject of non-duality just from the very human perspective of happiness. What constitutes happiness? What is that? Because at the end of the day, it's mostly what people are looking for. It's just that the way happiness is described, or the way that we learn about happiness, we learn it's to do with the acquisition of something, whatever it might be. You're in a particular moment. Let's say you're at work and you want to leave work, and you've still got 3 hours to wait until you leave work. So then you can feel unhappy because there's a gap between your current experience and the experience that you would like to have. So there is an appearance arises of discontent that we call unhappiness. And then that can be resolved in three ways. One, you wait until you leave work and then you feel happy. But that's often very fleeting. So the moment that you leave work, there's a sense of relief and you leave. But then very quickly, the next thing that you want to change moves into the field of view. And now you want that to change. It might be that your bus is late, or your taxi is too expensive, or whatever it is. So that form of happiness is actually, in certain Buddhist teachings, is called the suffering of change, right? So it's actually a suffering based on the perpetual change of existence. So either there's things that you don't have that you want to acquire, and there's things that you do have that you want to go away. And because the control of this system is outside of our own capacity to a large degree, it creates suffering. So it's, I feel unhappy, now I feel happy, I feel unhappy, now I feel unhappy. And this is an endless process that we go through. The other way to resolve happiness is to recognize there is no self. So the inward path would be, who is the one that's going to leave work? Who is the one that's going to enjoy that moment? Is it just a collection of thoughts and appearances? And if it is, am I any of those, or am I the observer of those? So once we break that, the condition of there being a doer that's going to become happy, we're now looking at it in a non-dualistic way. So the other way about happiness is to actually try and get the things. But then you realize no matter what you get, you literally are immediately, after a fleeting moment of relief, you're back to where you started. And the other way I mentioned was the inward path. Now, the other way that I talk about a lot in my work is the outward path. And this is dissolving the nature of the object. In this case, we was talking about the happiness of leaving work. So that image of leaving work is completely empty, and it has no validity. It doesn't have any substance. It's just an appearance of pure space. And every part of that process of changing your state from being in work to being out of work is also inherently empty. So that also ends the suffering. So when it comes down to the practice or the understanding of non-duality, it can sometimes feel a little bit maybe less impressive, when really what it boils down to is finding happiness in the moment, and finding that happiness is the moment, free of the elaborations. So when you practice not attaching value to whatever's appearing, but just allowing it to be an appearance that's arising, whether it's the arising of the self or arising of the external appearances, regardless, when you see that they arise as awareness, abide as awareness, and subside as awareness, happiness is what remains when everything else has been left to be as it is. And how do we know this? Because it happens in our daily experience. So if you go on holiday and you arrive at a beautiful destination, there's a moment of happiness, but it's not the destination that contains the happiness. The happiness is built in your nature. If you don't mind muting, I can do it here. Okay. The happiness is built in to the nature of mind. All what happens when you arrive at this holiday destination is your mind says, I agree with this, and then joy appears immediately. I agree with this. And then what happens? You've been there 10 minutes and you're just agreeing with this. And then a bunch of really noisy tourists, a big group, also staying at your magical hotel, are right next door to your room. And immediately you stop agreeing with it. So if the happiness was the sunset and the beach, if that was the happiness, it wouldn't be disturbed by the people coming next door who are rowdy and noisy or whatever it might be. So it's very helpful sometimes to just move away a little bit from some of the deeper conversations that we have about the nature of mind, and even some of the deeper teachings and the ancient text, and just start to explore, are you happy on a day-to-day or moment-by-moment basis? And this is the question I'm posing for you today. If you feel you want to share on this, is what is your? I want to hear more about your actual life experience, your lived experience, whether you feel you're living your experience in a liberated way, whether thoughts are dominant, whether sensations are dominant, and how is your actual experience as a non-dual practitioner? Has it changed from before? Is it the same as before? Are there any aspects that may seem feel limited? So I want to understand a little bit your lived experience, where you're currently at, and what's appearing for you. So if you do want to share, feel free to unmute yourself. As I said, today's session is a little bit different from normal, because normally I just allow open-ended questions, but I thought this would be somewhat interesting to see. How is your experience? You can still ask the questions that you have, but I'm trying to encourage you to relate it more to your own direct felt experience of life, because that's really where the power will be found from these types of teachings.
Yeah, hiya. Yeah, what I'm thinking is I've recently joined a 12-week Buddies course. It was 2 weeks ago in Sheffield. And I'm finding since that couple of weeks that, they give us homework to do, so to speak, and encourage us to do direct experience and to know direct experience, etc. And I've been feeling that my perceptions have been, because I like to experiment anyway, and I like to experiment with different things. And I've been speaking to a lot of different people and surrounding myself with lots of different people, more so the last couple of weeks than I have, for example, in the last like sort of year and a half, in which I discovered like sort of direct perception and through Eckhart Tolle, Muji, etc. So I'm surrounding myself more with people, including this satsang, talking to people. I'm not coming out, but just surrounding myself with others that are of the same, have the same like sort of quest or ilk or whatever. So, yeah, and I found that I found an expansion within myself of space
Right.
and a more. I've always been a social guy anyway, but it's um, it's like to me, I can only describe it as an expansion of space within me and also without. So, whenever I look out into the horizon or go into the park or whatever, it seems bigger, but it also seems, rather than me going, oh, it's amazing, I would say, like, so it's a natural part of me. I'll see a beautiful sunset. It's a natural part of me, and I'll just
Right. Yeah.
rest in that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what the experience is. It's
Yeah.
it's more and more the appearances are included as you,
Yeah.
and when they are you, something changes in your relationship to them. There's less tension both ways. Excuse me. From avoiding experience and yearning after experience. So desire and aversion begins to subside to a degree, and they are impediments to happiness.
Mm.
Aversion is I don't want this, which means that I don't want what could be coming or what's here right now. And desire is I still don't want what's here, I want that. And when you see that whatever you're desiring is an appearance of your own nature, it still has an allure, but
Mm.
it's significantly reduced because through the power of insight, you understand what it is. We could use anything. We could use a cake. People like cake, right? But when you recognize that the appearance is born of pure space, it's a rendition of the dynamic energy of pure space appearing as this object,
Yeah.
and that makes it less enticing, but you can still enjoy it. It's not like you never eat it again. It's just the pull goes away. Same with things that you would generally avoid, particularly people. We all know difficult people, but you find that when you allow things to be as they are, this tendency to avoid someone that feels uncomfortable often turns into compassion, right? Because it's a form of self-compassion, because the person is included in your experience of self.
Mm.
They're also a part of you. And again, it doesn't mean you're going to spend all day hanging out with someone that you don't like, right? It's not that we become martyrs or become abstainers. I'm never eating cake again, and I'm always going to hang about with people that I don't like, which would be silly. It's not a test or competition. We just start to notice this innate peace or increased peace around individual circumstances as they appear. And the way you was describing the park and the vista, it reminds me a bit when I first read The Power of Now, which was actually when it came out, I think
Yes.
close when it came out, like the very first part of that book, and he says the trees were luminous, and I read it. I said, mate, where's the bit before? Like he started at the awakening, and I wanted to know
Oh,
more.
right, I see. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
but the point is not to share that. The point is that's what tends to happen, and it also doesn't mean that you're always perceiving everything as bliss, right? That would be artificial and somewhat um, um, unlikely, because everything's always changing. So the happiness that I'm referring to, which is a Western word, is really trying to describe ananda, which is a Sanskrit word, which translates into bliss, which is ineffective, because when we think of bliss, we think of a very high state. But ananda really would be more accurate to describe it as perpetual contentment
Mm.
in all circumstance. You know, you have a good evening, it's content. You have a bad evening, it's content. A problem occurs, it's content. You don't stray as far from your seat of stability. And over time, this sense of stability becomes what happiness is defined as an or not completely unshakable, but a near unshakable sense of well-being in all circumstances, even if you're suffering, right? So if there's no self and no other, and you have a flu with the headache, and you're lying in bed and it's excruciating and you feel miserable, that can be appearing whilst you're also free of it.
Yeah.
Because
I've been looking to settle into that type of way. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm going through horrendous personal circumstances at the moment. What would you call horrendous? You know what I mean? In a duality type of way, but it's just like uh, but this is happening what I described partly because of these circumstances, because I'm reacting the right way through certain teachings, including yourself, of direct experience. Because I'm used to doing transcendental meditation twice a day, right? So, which is great, you know what I mean? Meditation's great and it has its place, but it's just like what they believe is that you should just do in transcendental meditation and the Maharishi is that you should just do it twice a day and then let it just organically go, you know what I mean, and organically happen, that state of mind in everyday life, which for me is just like sort of it didn't really work for me over about a year or so. So it's don't get me wrong, it gives me lots of energy and it improves my clarity in things. However, it's not. I needed this type of thing, you know, like sort of as in, you know, the Tibetan experience, the direct experience, what was it, the Zog, the Dogbas, what, yeah,
Dzogchen.
Dzogchen, etc. I needed to practice that more, you know what I mean, in an everyday way and be conscious of it rather than the transcendental meditation way of saying, okay, let it just happen organically. Don't even consciously try to do this every moment.
Hmm.
Do you know what I'm
No, I
saying?
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. So when I first started looking at the nature of mind, I couldn't meditate. I was unable to sit still.
Well, I've got
Um,
ADHD as well. I was diagnosed last year.
yeah,
So, yeah.
and I had a lot of trauma going on in my body and my mind, and I felt in a pretty bad way. And the meditative path just wasn't available to me. And there's a lot of people who are like that, who just don't have even the capacity to even begin a meditation practice. often, you know, it's said that it's better nowadays because they suggest you sit in a chair. But at that time, I was about 340 pounds and I couldn't even sit cross-legged. I used to sit with my knees up, and it was just, the whole thing was just a very challenging experience. But fortunately, awakening is an equal opportunity experience, and it doesn't actually require meditation to awake. Meditation is very useful in terms of working on your causes and conditions, right? So if you have a very active mind, or you have some other experiences that can feel quite challenging, like lack of concentration or focus, meditation, the meditation that's taught generally, can help with that. It
That's how it
helps.
helped me. Yeah.
It does help.
Yeah.
But awakening is only about insight.
Yeah.
Awakening has nothing to do with meditation. It's insight into the nature of mind. And it can't be put any simpler than that. Insight into the nature of mind. And what I suspect, because I started meditating after I was on this quite well into my own realizations. And I imagine that when sages in India woke up, they naturally started becoming more meditative. And then someone took notes and said, "Oh, this is what we need to
Right.
do.
Yeah.
We need to
Yeah.
be more meditative," which is kind of can help. And then Buddhism really goes deep into that, but it's got nothing to do with this. The reason why I started today's session a bit differently with the topic of happiness is because I describe the greatest accomplishment of this journey, for want of a better word, is you are at ease with all experience. That is the most simple definition of enlightenment. You are at ease with all experience. As it arises, you are at ease during the arising. As it abides, you are at ease during the abiding. And as it subsides, you are at ease during the subsiding. But it's not because you're forcing ease, it's because you have the insight that whatever's arising is your own nature. So you're just watching the arising, and whatever abides is your own nature. It's the dynamic energy of the absolute that you are. And whatever subsides, it subsides as the absolute, and it leaves no trace, like a bird flying through the sky, or a finger drawing water. It doesn't leave a trace. It's very apparent and very vivid, whatever is appearing, but it arides, abides, and subsides and leaves no trace. And the reason why the practice that I share is to leave things as they are, because it is only by not engaging in the appearances that you get to see that they arise, abide, and subside. Because if you don't, if
Mm.
you get involved in them, you perpetuate them as something else. So Mark walks into the office, he's got his loud headphones on again, and it's really annoying. So rather than just realizing that it's just the appearance of mind, you go, Mark, turn your bloody headphones down, or whatever. Now you're creating, you're making everything reified, which means to make it solid.
Yeah.
So it's like grabbing clouds out of the sky and making them into a thing made of cotton. It's a pretty bad analogy, but you're picking up things and making them real by engaging in them, because only you as the absolute has always the capacity to make things real. If you decide that your parking ticket is the worst thing that's ever happened to you ever, it is. Like, you make it real. Or
I've,
if you
yeah,
decide, yeah.
I've got a
So
I've got a mate like that. Yeah, he's
yeah,
absolutely, everything is a disaster. So
yeah.
I wish everybody's got a mate like
Or
that.
everything's brilliant.
Yeah,
There's that great little
Paul Whitehouse,
analogy.
is it? Yeah, go
There's a little story of a monk living in a village, and a young woman gets pregnant by her boyfriend, but doesn't want her father to know. So when he finds her with the baby, she says it's the monks. The monk did it. So all the villagers go up to the monk's house on the hill with this baby, carrying pitchforks, and they say, "This is your baby. You've got to look after the baby now for all of its life." And he says, "Is that so?" And he takes the baby in. And then a year later or 2 years go by, and the woman eventually confesses that it was her boyfriend who got her pregnant. And all the villagers go up to the monk's house and say, "We're really sorry, but we want the baby back." And he gives the baby back, and he says, "Is
Yeah.
that so?"
Mm,
It's
yeah.
just, we always have a choice. And I know that there isn't really anyone choosing, but I try to avoid that type of language during these calls. It's useful sometimes, but not always. So we do have a choice. Do we want to reify all the experiences in our life and make them into things? Or do we want to let them be the nature of experience and we enjoy them as they are without attachment? Because why would you want to attach yourself to yourself? You see, so that's the way I look at
Mm,
it. Yeah, good. So as I said, it's a little bit different this week. We're seeing what people's
yeah.
understanding of
Nice
anybody
one.
else.
Thanks for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
So I mean, if anyone wants to share, you can raise your hand, and if not, I'm going to talk to whoever wants to talk to me, because that's how this works. So this works. So in my own experience, and this is something as well that's rarely talked about in these circles, and that is the effect your causes and conditions have on your own awakening. I'll get to you in 1 second, Laura. Thank you for raising your hand. So if you look into the world, you see quite a lot of teachers that, and I don't mean this with any disrespect whatsoever, quite a few teachers, some of the like recent modern teachers, they tend to come from what I can see anyway, experiences that seem somewhat average. If you look at people like Rupert Spear, Eckhart Tolle, etc., they seem quite well adjusted to a degree before the awakening, right? So when you awaken and you're already quite well adjusted in life, it's much easier for you to bear that awakening in your activities, because there isn't so much of causes and conditions that are very detrimental to overcome. So the awakening can feel simultaneous to the liberation, right? But actually, the more causes and conditions you've got that are detrimental, like trauma, histories of abuse, addiction, anger, violent background, what we might call childhood uh, trauma, when you awakening is insight. You see clearly that you've never suffered. But that doesn't mean all your weird ways of being don't evaporate overnight. So then you spend some time applying these teachings to your behavior. And this is where the real work is done. And I know that people in the non-dual circles want to assume that you just awaken overnight, but I don't know many people that are in non-duality teachings that also feel completely free. They still feel frustrated, they still feel angry, they still feel alone. It's all softer, it's all more manageable. There's a sort of glow that's emerging. But those causes and conditions, if they're very, very dense, then it does take time for those to dissolve. It's like an iceberg in the ocean. The iceberg is made of water. Your causes and conditions are made of consciousness. It's in a different mode, right? It's the same stuff, but it's very dense. So by definition, an iceberg and water is all water, but the experience is one's really hard and one is very fluid. And then when you put the sun of awareness, the warm sun of awareness on the iceberg, it melts and it aligns with the water. And this is what happens with your own character, personality, propensity to argue, any aggression that you have, any greed, any things that you've had. You're still awake, like you're free of it. You can see it's just the appearances of self. I let it be as it is. Anger arises, abides, subsides. But ultimately, you want all of that to dissolve into just pure beingness, because it is pure beingness. But you want to experience it. And you do that by observing it, being with it without reacting. And it's the non-reaction to your own impulses, whatever they may be, that clarifies them as empty and allows the wisdom of your awakening to percolate into your activities, into your relationships, and into how you show up in the world. And this isn't talks about a lot. It's almost like awakening is that. No, it's not. No, it's not. There's a like I grew up in a very difficult background, on the streets, in urban gangs, lots of violent tendencies, inabilities to socialize or function in a normal society. And all of that had to become bathed in the light of my own awareness and dissolve. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be doing what I'm doing now. So give yourself the grace to allow yourself to be awake, and also know that just by bathing yourself in this understanding, it will help go to what I call liberation, which is the resolution of the actual tendencies. And the last thing I'll say, then I get to Laura, this is something that Ramana Maharshi talked about, but it was removed by Papaji, not in a bad way. He just removed it and started talking about you're awake now, just be quiet. Where Ramana Maharshi was always about, he called them vasanas, the vasanas, which is the mental, emotional traces that go back to, he goes, you have to dissolve the vasanas in your practice. And that somehow got left out. So that's why I bring that up occasionally. All right, let's go to Laura and let's see what she would like to share. I'll just unmute you.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Laura.
Hi, and hi, everybody. I just wanted to really share what my experience has been all my life. And the paradox or the funny thing is that it's always been a rediscovering of what I already know to be true in the first place.
Right.
And it's only that it seems deeper, less deep, whatever, but it always has to be there in some form or other. Otherwise, my life just feels meaningless. And I can't stand that feeling of meaninglessness. And it can happen anywhere and anyhow, but it basically is very difficult to describe what it is. But it's so normal and it's so real, and it's yet everybody, and it's as if there are no. I the, I feel my best when I feel there's no need for the mind to go blabbering on and defining things for me, but just to
Yes.
have the
Yes.
experience. And it sounds very complicated to say it like that, but it's so simple. I don't want to give the impression it's complicated, because it isn't. And what I'm just doing, what I'm just really trying to do, is to keep rediscovering what I know to be true in the first place. And that's pretty well all the time in one form or another. And satsang is so valuable to me because I can share, maybe it's the atmosphere or whatever it is, but to be with people who are interested in the same thing, it makes it much stronger and makes it easier. Because for me,
Yes.
100% of this is not anything great that I do, because I don't do anything particularly, but it's just the hunger for it, the desire. That's 100% for me. It's the longing that will give it to me, nothing else.
That's fantastic. And what you can also do with the longing is recognizing that the longing is actually it.
Yeah,
Like rather than fulfill the longing, embrace completely longing, and longing is it, because
yeah,
there is nothing to get, and the longing is the celebration of self.
yeah,
And when you feel longing, you just completely relax, into the sense of longing. And the same for the sense of when meaningless arises. Meaningless contains all of the meaning of the entire universe in a single sensation. You just completely allow full meaningless to it to be as it is. I often use the word allow. Sometimes I use rest as awareness, but I like allow because allowing is the primary activity of pure consciousness or awareness is to allow, like the space in this room or the screen of this computer. Its primary activity is it allows. It doesn't resist any of the images. It doesn't resist any of the colors. It just allows them to appear, and they are welcome as long as they want to be. The screen never says, I can't wait until Joe stops talking. God, this computer's like, I want to get rid of that. Or it's not there going, oh, I really, really want Laura to talk next. It just allows. So when we allow, we automatically align with our nature as awareness instantly. As soon as you allow anything, you are awareness. And I think most people here either know that or they have a sense of that. But it becomes very apparent when you do what awareness does, which is to allow everything to be as it is. And that feels to me what is the practice. And the last thing I said about what you said is that from what I can understand of all the teachers I've ever studied, of every avenue that I've looked in, when someone has that longing, which another term for that is bodhicitta, which is the desire to awaken. And everybody here has that. When someone has that, it will be fulfilled. Like it's 100%, it will be fulfilled. If you have a strong commitment to understanding your nature, then it will, because it is your nature. We're not trying to gain something here. We're trying to want of a better word, to set aside what we've already been trained or learned to be, to discover how things really are. And this is a process of inquiry. And there's, as I said before, there's two paths of inquiry. There's the inward path. Do I exist? Which we call Advaita Vedanta. They all cover everything, but their primary vehicle in Advaita Vedanta is there's a dissolving of the self, the recognition that there is no self. And the outward path, there's different styles, but one of the profound ones is Dzogchen, but Tantra is an outward path. Does the other exist? Does the other exist? And both of those journeys lead you to the same emptiness, which is Ananda, right? The release of self, the release of other, and then you start to just rest in your own nature while you're literally living within an illusory like world. So we're never going to be able to completely accurately describe our experience because the words don't exist.
No.
But as Lee mentioned earlier, the understanding of your nature appears as a greater spaciousness. And as I said earlier, an ease with whatever's appearing. You can always tell when you're attached to a sense of self or you're attached to a sense of object, is you will feel suffering, right? And suffering normally, to make it more clear, suffering normally appears as avoidance. So you can look wherever you're avoiding things in your life is where you are reifying things into existence, right? And I mean, I've always got some funny stories about this, but I literally used to say to people, like, that's empty, that's empty, that's a pizza, that's empty, that's empty. So it's like certain things, I couldn't see through them. And you have that, all the humans here, you will have different areas where you are more easily hooked back into self, thought, feeling, and things, right? That's things with it, like as a Londoner, it's like FINGS, but things, thoughts, feelings, and things. And everyone has a greater attachment to one of those. So the first thing that dissolved for me almost completely was things. I could absolutely see that no object has an inherent nature. It's just so clear to me. It didn't require any explanation. It's just obvious, right? Then thoughts was better for me but I was lucky in a way that you might find strange. My thoughts were so outrageous growing up in a sort of lock, stock, and two smoking barrels type environment that my way of thinking was obviously not, just had no validity. And I'm very open about it. Why is that person looking at me? Like this kind of stuff. I was lucky I could see, wow, these thoughts are nonsense. So all of the thinking space cleared. So I felt very free around objects, and I felt very, very free around my own thinking. And then the next one was the feelings. And that was much, much denser for me to see through feelings. Feelings were so real, and different types of feelings. So after a while, I found that the first strong feeling to go was anger. I just stopped being able to become very angry like I used to be able to be. And then sadness, that went away. And all of the emotions cleared, right? But a couple remained. Cravings. I think cravings, it's still there now, but that went on for at least a decade after everything else resolved. And that's why I say that joke. That's pure space. That's pure space. That's a pizza. That's pure space. That's pure space. But it's good that you're laughing, because the whole point of this is when you had that initial awakening, or when you start to see that these appearances, that they're not who you are, you can really enjoy discovering the self that you have. Like when I used to think I was the self, I was an angry, somewhat unhappy, hot-headed, kind of unpredictable, and extremely addicted, wounded character, but had a lot of talent, so I could get myself into a good career, right? But when I believed I was that, it was suffering. When I realized that I don't exist independent of pure space, that was the most soothing experience I've ever had, to recognize that all of that troubled self was just an appearance indivisible from pure love. Pure love, right? They're synonymous. So you really, you go through a process of great compassion for the self you've taken yourself to be, and all of the suffering around being that person, right? To whatever degree that is. Some it's less, some it's more. But once you see through that, then it's never personal again. It's literally the clock is ticking a bit slow. Let's fix it, right? So I mentioned the ADHD as well, and so did Lee. When I discovered I had ADHD, well after my awakening, so there was never any grief, regret, remorse, sadness. I was like, oh, that's an interesting room I've not been in. Let's explore that. and I immediately got myself an ADHD coach, and I spent 2 years working out what I could change and what I couldn't, and I changed what I could. But it was a really deeply enjoyable and satisfying process, filled with happiness, even discovering you have something that has been somewhat detrimental even to my teaching career. I realized the ADHD was one of the reasons why I didn't teach for years, because I just couldn't get it together to do it. So without going too far astray, the initial awakening is where I suggest you pay attention to. So you start asking yourself, what is me? What isn't me? When this experience, like for the self, the one that is looking, you have to ask yourself, if I can see this, can it be me? So if I'm in an angry mood and I can witness that, can I be the anger? And if the anger fades, what remained? If the separate self is no longer angry, but I'm still noticing that, how can I be that? How can I possibly be what's changing? And you get great confidence in this. You really start to see it's so preposterous that you can be the thing that's changing, because you wouldn't be able to witness it because you would change with it. Right? But you know you're not. You know you're not. Externally, something appears into your life, like this ADHD timer with the nice little visual thing, right? That's appeared in your life, but it's gone now. Did you go? Right? And think about everything in your life like that: your car, the last house you lived in, your relationships, the last view. Just all you've got to do is turn around and all what's over there's gone. Right? So if it goes, what remains? And this is the inquiry. If my internal environment, my emotions, things are always changing, yet I'm noticing it, am I that? And if I look outside and I see the whole world is constantly changing, yet I'm still there observing it, can I be that? I'm not going to obviously answer it, because you know my answer. But this is the inquiry that you can do simultaneously, and you arrive at an unshakable conclusion that you are the knower of experience. You are no longer, at that point, you are no longer the subject of experience. That is the difference. That's what stops suffering. When you believe you are the subject of experience, then your world is made up of things that are going to happen to you. And some are good and some are bad. And there's a really bad one on the horizon that we're all going to face, the tsunami of non-existence, right? That's in the, so you spend this life as a subject. Oh, I didn't like that. Oh, I did like that. Oh, I want that. Oh, that never happened. Oh, I regret that. Oh, I never had kids. Or I had kids and they were stupid. Or whatever it might be. Whatever it might be. Or they were brilliant. Or they were brilliant. Whatever it is. But it's all happening to you. And that's the definition of suffering. And you have to ask yourself, is it really happening to me? Like, is it really happening to me? It's really is fascinating to look at this. Is it really happening to me? And where I explore this is after each experience. So I just had my dinner about an hour ago now. After each experience, I ask myself, where is it now? Where is it now? I had a massage earlier. I should get more because I do live in Thailand, but I don't go. But I did go today. Fantastic massage, $5. Where is it now? Where is anything you've ever experienced? endless flow of emptiness happening to no one. And this is where you can get the sense of meaningless, which I know you had a different example, but I'm just going to say this, is that can feel, well, what's the point? Because the happiness, which is what we started this discussion with, is the whisk of the now, the flickering of the flame of the now. That the happiness is the dissolution, that the knowing of it, the knowing of the insubstantial appearances is happiness. You've all sat on a vista just looking out to sea or wherever, and you're just enjoying it. That's nature's way of giving us a satsang, right? But that's the same as when you're in the office or at the party or visiting relatives. It's the same. There is a continual flow of exquisite beauty flying by at all times without describing it. The flicker of life constantly in flux, never crystallizing. It never becomes solid. Nothing ever becomes solid, right? They dissolve. They dissolve upon appearing, right? It's called freedom in the immediacy of perceiving. The freedom, we've gone a bit deeper than I wanted to today, but I'm here. It's the freedom in the perception as it dissolves. It dissolves upon upon perception. That is what we are enjoying in life. And if you go there and look at life from that, the constant movement dissolving, simultaneous. There's no time involved here. It's simultaneous. And you watch that, that's Ananda. That's Ananda. And from that perspective, I like to call it a throne, because it's a very majestic asana to be in. When you perceive from there, you're perceiving as the knower of experience, then all of the wisdom that you could ever possibly want becomes available in making decisions around your life and what you should do next and how you can be of benefit or what's helpful for you, because there's a complete non-attachment to the array that was always in flux. And it's the flux, like, it's very difficult to extract. I do my best to describe it. It's like what a human being is the juncture of the knowing and the known. So we're not a thing, we're an activity at the juncture of the knowing and the known. That is happiness.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. That resonates. The last thing you said, definitely. Yeah. It's was there some famous scientists that said the optimal experience is just on the cusp of learning and knowing and knowing things. It rings a similar sort of bell anyway. This is like, I can't remember the name.
I get. I've heard something about that. Yeah. This
I know it's not exactly the same thing, but it's just like,
it's related. Yeah. It's related.
Yeah.
This is where art, poetry, music is really helpful, because it can help convey things that and I do realize I do have some capacity with my words, and I try to use them to be of benefit by describing this experience in a way that can resonate. But sometimes just art can do it. Looking at an incredible sculpture or painting or a piece of music or something like that, because the knowing of what I've just described, it's actually beyond the mind. Like, I'm not sure if the mind ever gets to, the brain. I'm not sure if the brain ever gets to experience that. I think it sort of goes a little bit offline. And that's what art, poetry, music can do, and perhaps satsangs as well. So it's really just, whenever you remember, let things be as they are, and then pay attention to whatever appears as a result of taking that posture. Now, I have recently started using the word posture a lot because I want to reawaken Patanjali's teachings, who was a great sage, and the Yoga Sutras are extremely powerful. And in the Yoga Sutras, there are no physical asanas, but he does use the word asana. And what he's referring to when he discusses asana is what I describe as leaving everything as it is. You have a posture, your asana is a posture of openness, availability, non-attachment. And then yoga from sutra number 2 is yoga chitta vitri namaroda. So yoga, the union or the awakening, is the mastery of the appearances of mind. Now, namroda is often translated as control. And that's where people started to meditate to try and control the appearances of mind. But anyone, raise your hand if you think you can control the appearances of mind. Like, you could say to someone, I will give you £1 million if you can think about an orange for 5 minutes. Like, most people would lose that bet. If they had a way to track it, most people would struggle with 60 seconds. So you can't control your mind, but the mastery comes from the posture toward the appearances. The posture of, like, I am the majesty. I am chitta, consciousness, the majesty, and the appearances are my dynamic energy. And I don't need to control them because they are me. If everything is made of milk, you don't have to avoid spilling milk. And you certainly won't cry over spilt milk if everything is made of milk, including, like, everything. In Tibet, they used the saying, on an island of gold, everything is made of gold, which I find very powerful. So whatever thoughts are appearing, gold. Whatever losses you are enduring, gold. Whatever enjoyment you are experiencing, gold. Whatever pain you are facing, gold. On an island of gold, everything is made of gold. In awareness, in consciousness, everything is made of consciousness, including you, the knower, and the separate self that you are aware of. It's all made of consciousness only. And when you really deeply experience this knowing in your life, you start to feel safe. You start to feel safe for perhaps the first time in your life. because you realize that on an island of awareness, everything's made of awareness. So whatever appears to be acting against you as a subject is just awareness, right? On a movie, everything is made of screen. This is why we can enjoy extremely negative movies, because we know that whatever's happening on the screen is made of screen. So even in a very sad movie that we perhaps cry, which we've probably all done, there's still a sense that it was all made of screen. And that is a direct comparison to what happens to your approach to life. You realize that because there's only this, that whatever's happening is happening sort of, but not absolutely. And that takes the edge off everything in the same way watching a movie does, because no one could watch some of the movies that they make if you didn't know it was a screen. And this is the same with your own life, that when you start to recognize, you start to notice the inseparable nature of all experience, including yourself, from awareness, then the edge is removed and all experience becomes manageable. And then you add what we said earlier, that you realize it also leaves no trace. And it's also dissolving on appearance. Then these little realizations begin to change your whole way of being, until you start to develop, and some of you probably already have this, there is an instinctive recognition. So there isn't even the processing of the moment to find insight. It's instinctive. It becomes devoid of thinking about it. It's just instinctive. Like, you don't even recognize, like you stop. This is a bit unusual, but you stop even realizing you're awake. Like, it just becomes, you're just not suffering or grasping, or you have the same tone of experience all the time. You're always in that tone of clarity all the time, even if your causes and conditions are playing up, and maybe you smoke too much or something. That clarity doesn't abate. It becomes even more brighter all the time. And from that piercing clarity, you are able to make amends for any of the causes and conditions that you have that cause detriment to others. Right? It's really fascinating. And I don't know if many people talk about it like this, but it's you feel clear. You are instinctively recognizing the nature of reality, so you're not falling into mood swings or difficulties or things, but occasionally one of your old triggers will be ignited, and you might have a tendency, but because the clarity's there, it catches the tendency while it's appearing, and then you make amends if you acted on it. You spoke harshly to someone, or more and more you catch it before it even becomes an action. So it's a very beautiful place, and it never ends. There's no arrival. It never ends. You just like the last thing I'll say about it is one way I could describe it. It would be like, and this is a guess, but it's like, if a baby had the same knowledge that you had about things, but retained its awe, right? It cries if it needs to cry, and it stops immediately, right? It is completely perceptually open to all experience, right? Everything is a curiosity. Everything, nothing has a label. Nothing has a label. It just appears, and it's, wow, look at this thing, right? So it's that sort of openness, but with the wisdom of an adult and the discernment of an adult. But at the same time, there's a very free and available spaciousness in which to respond to life. And all of this together creates this sense of happiness, which is what we started with. It creates a sense of happiness that doesn't falter because it's not dependent on what's appearing. Thank you, Mac. And thank you, everyone, for coming to Satsang. And we will be doing it again